The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Kate Middleton stood before the antique mirror in her private chambers, adjusting the delicate tiara that had been passed down through generations of royal women. Today was special. She would be attending her first official ceremony as the future Queen of England, and the weight of tradition felt heavier than the jeweled crown itself. Her fingers trembled slightly as she touched the precious stones. Each diamond seemed to hold the whispers of queens who had worn this crown before her. Queen Elizabeth, Princess Diana, and countless others whose names were etched in history books. Now, it was her turn to carry on this legacy, but the responsibility felt overwhelming. "Ma'am, the car is ready," her lady-in-waiting announced softly from the doorway. Kate nodded, taking one last look at her reflection. The woman staring back at her seemed like a stranger, elegant, poised, but somehow distant from the girl who had once dreamed of a simple life. She had married for love, but love in the royal family came with prices that ordinary people could never imagine. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey was magnificent. Hundreds of guests filled the ancient halls, their voices joining in hymns that had echoed through these walls for centuries. Kate felt every eye upon her as she walked down the aisle, the crown catching the light from the stained glass windows. She was no longer just Catherine Middleton. She was the Duchess of Cambridge, future queen, and symbol of a monarchy that had survived wars, scandals, and changing times. William walked beside her, his military uniform perfectly pressed, his face showing the same composure that had been trained into him since childhood. But Kate could see the tension in his eyes. Being royal meant wearing masks, even with those you loved most. They had learned to communicate with glances, small gestures that outsiders would never notice. After the ceremony, they returned to the castle for a private dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration, but the atmosphere felt strained. Camilla, now queen consort, had been watching Kate throughout the day with an expression that was difficult to read. There had always been an unspoken tension between them, a careful dance of respect and underlying competition for influence within the family. "You looked beautiful today, Catherine," Camilla said as they gathered in the drawing room. Her voice was warm, but her eyes remained distant. "The crown suits you." "Thank you," Kate replied, her hand instinctively moving to touch the tiara. "It's an honor to wear something with such history." Camilla smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. History can be a burden as much as an honor. I learned that the hard way. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the room knew about Camilla's difficult journey to acceptance within the royal family. She had faced years of public criticism, comparisons to Diana, and struggles to find her place. Now that she had finally achieved the position of queen consort, she seemed determined to protect her hard-won status. King Charles, lost in conversation with William about upcoming royal duties, seemed oblivious to the tension between the two women. The men discussed matters of state while the women maintained their polite facade, each aware that they were engaged in a subtle battle for position and influence. As the evening progressed, Kate began to feel the weight of more than just the crown. The elaborate dinner, the formal conversations, the constant awareness of being observed and judged, it all pressed down on her like a heavy blanket. She excused herself and stepped out onto the castle balcony, breathing in the cool night air. The gardens below were illuminated by soft lights, creating a fairy tale scene that tourists would pay fortunes to glimpse. But for Kate, this beautiful prison sometimes felt more constraining than magical. She thought about her children, already being groomed for lives of duty and service, and wondered if she was giving them enough normalcy. Overwhelming, isn't it? Kate turned to find Camilla had followed her outside. The older woman's expression had softened, and, for a moment, the mask of royal formality slipped away. Some days more than others, Kate admitted honestly. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life?" Camilla was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the grounds where she had walked for years, slowly earning her place in a family that had once rejected her. Regret is a luxury we can't afford in this family. We make our choices and live with the consequences. But what about happiness? What about being true to ourselves? Being true to ourselves is a privilege for ordinary people, my dear. We serve something larger than our personal desires. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. William appeared in the doorway, his face showing concern. "Everything all right out here?" "Of course," Camilla replied smoothly, the royal mask sliding back into place. "We were just admiring the gardens." But Kate could see in William's eyes that he had sensed the tension. He knew his wife well enough to recognize when she was struggling, even if he couldn't always help her through it. The demands of royal life left little time for the kind of intimate conversations that had once been natural between them. Back inside, the evening continued with more formal pleasantries. Kate played her part perfectly, gracious, interested, appropriately deferential to the senior royals. But inside, she felt herself fragmenting into pieces. The woman she had been, the woman she was expected to be, and the woman she might have become in a different life. The crown, which had felt so meaningful during the ceremony, now seemed like a beautiful cage. Each diamond represented not just tradition and honor, but also expectations, limitations, and sacrifices. She found herself touching it frequently throughout the evening, as if reassuring herself that it was real, that this life was real, that she hadn't simply dreamed herself into this strange existence. When the evening finally ended and they retired to their private quarters, William loosened his tie and sat heavily on the bed. For the first time all day, his shoulders sagged with exhaustion. "Long day," he said simply. Kate carefully removed the crown and placed it on its special stand. In the mirror, she watched herself transform back from symbol to person, from duchess to wife. "William, do you think we're raising our children right? Preparing them for all this?" He considered the question seriously. William had grown up in the public eye, had lived through his parents' divorce, his mother's death, and the constant scrutiny of the press. He knew better than anyone the costs of royal life. "I think we're doing the best we can with an impossible situation," he said finally. "We can give them love, stability, and as much normalcy as possible. The rest, they'll have to figure out for themselves, just like we did." Kate nodded, but his words didn't entirely comfort her. She thought about their oldest son, George, who was already showing signs of understanding that his life would be different from other children's. How do you explain to a child that he was born to serve others before himself? How do you prepare someone for a life where personal happiness must always come second to duty? As she prepared for bed, Kate caught sight of herself in the mirror again. Without the crown, without the formal dress and jewelry, she looked almost like any other woman getting ready for sleep. But she wasn't any other woman, and tomorrow she would put on the mask again, play the role again, carry the weight of expectations and tradition again. The crown sat on its stand, gleaming in the lamplight. Beautiful, priceless, and somehow ominous. It would be there tomorrow, waiting for her, as it had waited for all the women who had worn it before. Some had worn it with joy, others with resignation, and still others with quiet desperation. Kate wondered which category she would eventually fall into. For now, she was still finding her way, still learning to balance the woman she was with the role she had accepted. But already she could feel herself changing, becoming someone who could carry the weight of a crown without crumbling beneath it. The question was whether that person would still be recognizably herself, or if the crown would eventually transform her into someone else entirely, someone who could fulfill her duties but might lose her soul in the process. Outside, the wind rustled through the ancient trees that had witnessed centuries of royal joys and sorrows. Inside the castle, Kate closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to be ordinary, to have dreams that belonged only to herself. But already, those memories were beginning to fade, replaced by the heavy knowledge of what she must become. 3 months had passed since the ceremony, and Kate had settled into a routine that felt both natural and suffocating. Each morning brought new obligations, new appearances, new opportunities to smile and wave while her real thoughts remained carefully hidden. The crown had become familiar, but its weight never lessened. The public adored her. Newspapers called her the People's Princess, comparing her to Diana while praising her stability and grace. Fashion magazines analyzed every outfit choice. Charity organizations competed for her patronage. She had become exactly what the monarchy needed, a modern royal who could bridge the gap between tradition and contemporary life. But success in public often came at the cost of peace in private. The royal family was a complex machine, and Kate was still learning her place within its intricate workings. Every interaction was layered with protocol, precedents, and unspoken rules that had been established over centuries. Camilla had been particularly attentive lately, offering guidance on everything from public speaking to managing difficult press situations. On the surface, it appeared to be mentorship, but Kate sensed something more calculated beneath the helpful exterior. Camilla had fought too hard for her position to easily share influence, even with the future queen. "Catherine, dear, might I have a word?" Camilla approached after a particularly challenging charity luncheon, where Kate had given her first major speech as a senior royal. They retreated to a private sitting room in Clarence's house, away from the staff and other family members. Camilla poured tea with practiced elegance, her movements betraying none of the tension that Kate could feel building between them. "Your speech today was lovely," Camilla began, "but I noticed you deviated from the prepared remarks. While spontaneity can be charming, it's important to remember that every word we speak in public is scrutinized." Kate stirred her tea slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I felt it was important to speak from the heart. The charity deals with children who've lost parents. I thought a more personal approach would be appropriate." "Personal is dangerous," Camilla replied, her voice gentle but firm. "I learned that lesson the hard way. The moment we become too human in public, the press begins to look for our flaws, our weaknesses. They want to tear us down as much as they want to build us up." It was advice born from experience, Kate knew. Camilla had endured decades of negative coverage, had been blamed for the breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage, had been called names and criticized for everything from her appearance to her past relationships. She had survived by becoming nearly untouchable, perfectly controlled, impeccably proper. But surely some authenticity is good. Kate pressed. "People want to feel connected to us." Camilla set down her teacup with a small clink. "People want the illusion of connection. They want to believe we're just like them, while simultaneously expecting us to be better than them. It's a contradiction we must navigate carefully." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Princess N, who entered the room with her characteristic no-nonsense energy, and had always been the most practical of the royals, the one who worked hardest and complained least about the family's obligations. "Am I interrupting?" and asked, though she was already settling into a chair. "Not at all," Camilla replied smoothly. "We were just discussing the challenges of public engagements." And looked between the two women, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Advice, Camilla? How thoughtful. Though I suspect Catherine is quite capable of finding her own way." There is a subtle rebuke in Anne's words, a reminder that Kate didn't need to be managed or controlled, and had always maintained her independence within the family structure, carving out her own role while refusing to be diminished by anyone. "Of course," Camilla said, but her smile had become slightly fixed. "I simply thought my experience might be helpful." Experience is valuable, Anne agreed, but every generation must face their own challenges. What worked for us might not work for Catherine. The exchange was polite on the surface, but Kate could feel the undercurrents of family dynamics that she was still learning to navigate. And Camilla had different views on how the monarchy should evolve, different ideas about Kate's role within it, and different levels of trust in her ability to succeed. After and left for another engagement, Camilla's demeanor shifted slightly. The helpful mentor facade remained, but something harder showed through. "And means well," Camilla said, "but she doesn't understand the particular pressures you'll face as queen. She was born into this life. You chose it. That makes your situation more complicated. Kate felt a chill at the subtle implication. Are you suggesting that being born royal is easier than marrying into it? I'm suggesting that those who are born to it never question their right to be here. Those of us who married in, well, we must constantly prove ourselves worthy. The words hung between them like a challenge. Kate realized that Camilla saw her not as an ally, but as competition. Both women had married into the family. Both had faced public scrutiny. Both had earned their places. But now only one of them would become queen, and that reality colored every interaction between them. That evening, Kate found herself alone in the castle library, surrounded by centuries of royal history. She pulled down books about previous queens, studying their portraits and reading about their lives. Some had been beloved, others controversial, a few had been forgotten entirely. All had worn crowns, smiled at public events, and struggled to balance duty with personal happiness. She paused at a biography of Queen Alexandra, Edward VII's wife, who had been beautiful, charitable, and popular with the public. But the book also revealed her loneliness, her husband's many affairs, and her gradual withdrawal from public life as she grew older and less able to maintain the perfect image required of her. Was this her future? Kate wondered. Would she slowly transform from the radiant young woman the public adored into another forgotten queen whose private pain was hidden behind public smiles? Her phone buzzed with a text from William. Running late again. State dinner preparation. It was the third time this week that royal duties had prevented them from spending evening time together. William was increasingly consumed by the expectations placed on him as heir to the throne. The easy intimacy they had once shared was being eroded by the constant demands of their public roles. Kate closed the book and walked to the window. Outside, tourists gathered at the castle gates, cameras ready to catch a glimpse of royal life. They saw the glamour, the beautiful dresses, the jewels, and ceremonies. They didn't see the isolation, the constant scrutiny, or the way her own identity was slowly being subsumed by her role. Her reflection in the window looked back at her, and for a moment she didn't recognize herself. The woman in the glass looked regal, composed, untouchable. But Kate remembered being someone who laughed easily, who could disappear into a crowd, who could make mistakes without headlines appearing in newspapers around the world. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was one of the household staff, carrying a message from Camilla requesting Kate's presence in her study. Kate found Camilla surrounded by photographs and documents planning upcoming royal engagements. The older woman looked up with a smile that seemed more genuine than their earlier conversation. Catherine, thank you for coming. I wanted to discuss the upcoming tour of Scotland. As this will be your first major solo tour, I thought we might coordinate our approaches. Kate sat across from her, noting the careful phrasing. Camilla wasn't offering to help. She was suggesting they coordinate, implying equal status that they both knew didn't exist. Kate was the future queen, but Camilla was the current queen consort with years more experience. I appreciate your input, Kate said diplomatically. The Scottish press can be particularly challenging, Camilla continued. They have long memories and strong opinions about the monarchy. Your approach will need to be perfect. As Camilla outlined various potential pitfalls and proper responses, Kate found herself studying the woman across from her. Camilla had indeed survived incredible public hostility to reach her current position. She had been patient, strategic, and ultimately successful in winning acceptance. But that success had come at a cost. She had become someone who trusted no one completely, who analyzed every interaction for potential threats to her position. Was this what survival in the royal family required? Kate wondered, would she eventually become equally calculating, equally guarded, equally unable to form genuine connections with anyone? Are you listening, Catherine? Camilla's voice cut through her thoughts. Of course. I was just thinking about your suggestions. Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she could sense that Kate's attention had been elsewhere. This is important. you know? Your success reflects on all of us, but your failures will be attributed to your outsider status. The warning was clear. Kate was being reminded that she would always be seen as someone who had married into the family rather than being born to it. Any mistakes would be blamed on her common origins, any successes attributed to royal training and influence. I understand, Kate replied, but inside she felt a growing resentment. She had given up everything for this life: her privacy, her independence, her ability to be spontaneous or genuine. And still, it seemed, she would always be viewed as an outsider trying to prove herself worthy. The meeting continued for another hour, with Camilla offering detailed advice on everything from conversation topics to wardrobe choices. It was helpful information, but it was delivered with an undertone of superiority that made Kate feel like a student being lectured by a teacher. When she finally escaped back to her own quarters, Kate felt exhausted. The day had been filled with public engagements, family politics, and the constant pressure to be perfect. She thought about calling her sister Pippa or her parents, but even those relationships had become complicated by her royal status. Everyone treated her differently now. Friends were more formal. Family members were careful not to say anything that might be seen as seeking favor or influence. Even her parents, who had raised her with love and normalcy, now seemed slightly awed by what she had become. Kate sat on her bed and picked up a photograph from her nightstand, a picture of herself and William from their university days, young and carefree, unaware of how their lives would change. In the photo, they looked like any other couple in love, with no crowns or titles to complicate their happiness. She missed that simplicity desperately, but it was gone forever, as irretrievable as childhood. Now she was part of something larger than herself, something that demanded sacrifices she was still learning to accept. The crown sat on its stand across the room, beautiful and implacable. Tomorrow she would wear it again, smile again, play her role again. But tonight, in the quiet of her room, she allowed herself to mourn the woman she had been and worry about the woman she was becoming. The Scottish tour had been a triumph in the eyes of the media. Headlines praised Kate's warmth, her genuine interest in local communities, and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. She had visited hospitals, schools, and community centers, bringing attention and support to causes that truly mattered. For the first time in months, Kate felt like she was making a real difference rather than simply fulfilling ceremonial obligations. But success in public often created complications in private. The positive coverage of Kate's tour had not gone unnoticed by other members of the royal family, particularly Camilla, who had been quietly building her own reputation as an effective working royal for years. Upon Kate's return to London, the atmosphere in the palace felt different. Staff members who had previously been warm and welcoming now seemed more guarded. Conversations stopped when she entered rooms. Even her usual allies, like Princess and seemed to be maintaining a careful distance. It was William who, finally, explained what had happened during her absence. "There's been talk," he said carefully, as they sat in their private sitting room after the children had gone to bed, "about your popularity overshadowing other members of the family." Kate felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "What kind of talk?" William ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that revealed his stress. "The press coverage of your tour was overwhelmingly positive. Some people are concerned that it might create imbalances within the family structure." "Imbalances?" Kate's voice rose slightly. "William, I was doing my job. I was representing the crown exactly as I was supposed to. I know that. You know that. But popularity within the royal family can be complicated. There are hierarchies, expectations about who should receive which level of attention." Kate stared at her husband, trying to process what he was telling her. "Are you saying I was too successful? I should have been less engaging, less effective?" "I'm saying that we need to be careful about how we're perceived relative to other family members, particularly senior family members who have been working to establish their own roles and reputations." The implication was clear. Camilla felt threatened by Kate's success and was making her displeasure known through the complex network of palace politics and protocol. "This is insane," Kate said, standing up and pacing to the window. "We're supposed to be working toward the same goals, supporting the crown, serving the people. How does my success harm anyone else?" William joined her at the window, his expression troubled. "In theory, you're right. In practice, the royal family has always been about careful balancing of personalities and roles. Too much attention on any one person can create problems." Kate thought about Diana, about how her overwhelming popularity had eventually caused tension within the family. But Diana's situation had been different. She had been struggling in her marriage, had been seen as a threat to Charles's future reign. Kate's marriage to William was solid, and her popularity should have been seen as an asset to his future kingship. "So what are you suggesting?" she asked quietly. "Just be aware. Be careful about how your public role develops. Make sure you're seen as supporting the existing structure rather than overshadowing it." It was advice born from years of royal training, from a deep understanding of how the family functioned. But to Kate, it felt like being asked to diminish herself, to make herself smaller so that others could feel more secure. The next few weeks brought a series of subtle changes. Kate's upcoming engagements were reviewed more carefully by palace staff. Suggestions were made about sharing spotlight with other royals rather than taking solo appearances. Her speeches were subject to more extensive editing to ensure they didn't contain anything that might be seen as too personal or too distinctive. Most painfully, Camilla began inserting herself more prominently into Kate's public role. Joint appearances were arranged where Camilla would take the lead, with Kate positioned as the supportive daughter-in-law rather than the future queen. The message was clear. Kate needed to remember her place in the current hierarchy. The tensions came to a head during a particularly difficult week when Kate was scheduled to attend a gala for one of her patronage charities. It was an event she had been looking forward to, a chance to support a cause she cared deeply about, and to represent the crown in a meaningful way. 2 days before the event, Kate received a message requesting her presence in Camilla's private office. She found the queen consort surrounded by newspapers and magazines, many featuring photos from Kate's recent appearances. "Catherine, please sit down," Camilla said, her tone businesslike. "We need to discuss your upcoming gala appearance." Kate sat across from her, noting the formal atmosphere. This wasn't going to be one of their polite mentoring sessions. "I've been reviewing the guest list and the program for your charity gala," Camilla continued. "I think it would be appropriate for me to attend as well, to show family support for your work." Kate felt her heart sink. The gala was supposed to be her event, her opportunity to showcase her commitment to the charity and to speak passionately about issues she cared about. Having Camilla there would change the entire dynamic. "That's very kind of you," Kate said carefully, "but I think the charity was hoping for this to be focused on their specific mission. Adding more royal presence might shift attention away from their work." Camilla's smile became slightly strained. "I think you underestimate the value of showing family unity. The public likes to see us working together, supporting each other's efforts." "Of course, but this particular event has been generating quite a lot of media attention," Camilla interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps more than is appropriate for what should be a charitable function rather than a personal platform." The criticism stung because it was both unfair and calculated. Kate had worked hard to ensure that the gala focused on the charity's work rather than on her own image. But she realized that her very success in promoting the charity had somehow become a problem. "I've always tried to keep the focus on the causes rather than on myself," Kate said. "I'm sure you have. But perception can be more important than intention. We need to be seen as working together as a family, particularly given recent media coverage that has emphasized individual achievements over collective royal service." Kate understood the subtext. Her Scottish tour had been too successful, had garnered too much positive attention, and now she needed to be reminded that she was part of a team rather than a solo performer. "What exactly are you proposing?" Kate asked. "I think it would be best if I took a more prominent role at the gala." After all, I have more experience with high-profile charitable events, and my presence would demonstrate the Crown's full support for your patronage work. It was a masterful manipulation. Camilla was positioning herself as the senior royal, providing support and guidance, while simultaneously taking over Kate's event. And she was doing it in a way that made any objection seem ungrateful or selfish. Kate felt trapped. Refusing Camilla's support would be seen as disrespectful to the queen consort. Accepting it meant watching her own work and passion be overshadowed by palace politics. "I appreciate your offer," Kate said finally, "but I think this event is important for establishing my individual relationship with this particular charity. Perhaps we could find another opportunity to work together." Camilla's expression hardened slightly. "Catherine, I'm not sure you understand the broader implications of how you're positioning yourself within the family. Your individual relationships and individual achievements are less important than the collective image of the crown. But surely my effectiveness in my role benefits the entire family." Effectiveness is important, but it must be balanced with appropriate deference to the existing structure. You are the future queen, not the current queen. There is a difference, and it's important that the public understands that difference. The conversation had shifted from advice to warning. Kate realized that she was being asked to choose between her own authentic engagement with her role and her position within the family hierarchy. "I understand your concerns," Kate said, standing up. "But I believe I can serve the crown best by being genuine and effective in my engagements. The charity gala will focus on their important work, and I'll ensure that family unity is demonstrated appropriately." It was as close to a refusal as she could manage while still maintaining politeness. But both women understood that lines were being drawn. After Kate left, she felt shaky and upset. The conversation had made explicit what she had been sensing for months, that her success was seen as a threat rather than an asset, that her authenticity was viewed as potentially dangerous to the carefully maintained royal image. She found herself in the palace gardens, walking among the roses that had been tended by royal gardeners for generations. The beauty of the setting contrasted sharply with the ugliness of the politics she was being forced to navigate. Her phone buzzed with a text from William. How did the meeting go? The fact that he knew about the meeting, that he hadn't warned her about its purpose, suggested that these conversations about her role were happening at levels she wasn't privy to. Even her own husband was balancing his loyalty to her with his obligations to the family structure. Kate realized she was at a crossroads. She could accept Camilla's guidance and gradually diminish her own public presence to avoid threatening anyone's position. Or she could continue to be authentic and effective in her role, knowing that it might create ongoing conflicts within the family. Looking at the ancient castle walls that had witnessed centuries of royal drama, Kate understood that she was facing the same choice that had confronted every royal bride before her: conform or resist, blend in or stand out, survive or thrive. The crown that had once seemed like a symbol of honor and service was beginning to feel like a cage. But unlike some of her predecessors, Kate wasn't sure she was willing to be trapped by it. The question was whether she would find a way to maintain her authenticity within the system, or whether the system would ultimately force her to become someone she no longer recognized. The gala was still 2 days away, but Kate already knew it had become about much more than charity work. It had become a test of whether she could maintain her own identity and values while navigating the complex, sometimes cruel politics of royal life. As she walked back toward the castle, Kate caught sight of her reflection in a window. The woman looking back at her seemed stronger somehow, more determined. Perhaps the pressure was revealing who she really was beneath the royal training and expectations. The crown was waiting for her in her quarters, as always. But for the first time, Kate wondered if she would wear it, or if it would ultimately wear her. The morning of the charity gala arrived with unusual tension in the palace. Kate had spent a restless night, her mind racing through possible scenarios and consequences. She had made her decision. She would proceed with the event as originally planned, but she would be prepared for whatever political fallout might follow. Her lady-in-waiting helped her dress in a stunning navy blue gown that was both elegant and appropriate for the serious nature of the charity's work. As they placed the tiara on her head, Kate caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked every inch the future queen, but more importantly, she looked like someone who had found her strength. "Ma'am, the queen consort has sent word that she'll be arriving at the venue early to review arrangements," her aide informed her quietly. Kate nodded calmly, though her heart rate increased. Camilla was following through on her intention to insert herself into the event, despite Kate's diplomatic objection. It was a power play disguised as royal support. The gala venue was magnificent, a historic London hotel that had hosted royal events for over a century. The charity had worked for months to secure notable speakers, arrange displays of their work, and create an atmosphere that would inspire generous donations for children's literacy programs. When Kate arrived, she found Camilla already there, dressed impeccably and speaking with the event organizers. The charity director looked confused and slightly overwhelmed as Camilla suggested changes to the program, including having herself introduced as the primary royal patron rather than Kate. "Your Majesty," Kate approached with a warm smile, though her voice carried a note of steel. "How wonderful that you could make time to support this important cause." "Catherine, dear," Camilla replied smoothly, "I was just discussing with the organizers how we might make the evening even more impactful. I've suggested some adjustments to the program that might help raise more funds." The charity director, caught between two royals, looked to Kate helplessly. "Your Royal Highness, we're honored by Her Majesty's interest, but we have prepared everything according to your specifications." Kate smiled reassuringly at the director. "And you've done a wonderful job. I think we should proceed exactly as planned. After all, this evening is about the children who will benefit from your programs, not about royal protocol." It was a gentle but firm statement that the event would remain as Kate had envisioned it. Camilla's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her gracious facade. "Of course," Camilla agreed, "though I do think my experience with high-profile fundraising events might be helpful. Perhaps we could make some small adjustments that would benefit the cause." The staff and organizers watched this polite battle with growing discomfort. Both women were smiling, both speaking about the charity's welfare, but everyone could sense the underlying power struggle. "I appreciate your expertise," Kate replied, her tone remaining pleasant but decisive. "However, I've worked closely with this charity for months to understand their specific needs and goals. I believe the current program best serves their mission." The message was clear. This was Kate's event, her patronage, her responsibility. She was politely but firmly declining Camilla's attempt to take control. The evening proceeded with Kate maintaining her position despite several more attempts by Camilla to redirect the focus. When it came time for speeches, Camilla tried to position herself to speak first, but Kate smoothly introduced her to the audience as Her Majesty, who has graciously honored us with her presence in support of my patronage work. It was a masterful move that acknowledged Camilla's status, while firmly establishing Kate as the primary royal representing the charity. The audience responded warmly to Kate's speech about children's literacy, and several major donors approached her afterward to discuss expanding their support. Throughout the evening, Kate noticed several staff members and minor royals watching the interaction between her and Camilla with great interest. Palace politics were always closely observed, and this public, polite confrontation would be analyzed and discussed for weeks. As the evening wound down, Kate felt a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. She had successfully maintained control of her own event and demonstrated that she wouldn't be easily manipulated or overshadowed. But she also knew that there would be consequences for this public assertion of independence. Those consequences came sooner than expected. The next morning, Kate was summoned to meet with King Charles himself, a rare occurrence that indicated the seriousness of the situation. She found Charles in his private study, surrounded by newspapers covering the gala. The headlines were positive, praising both the event and Kate's passionate advocacy for children's literacy. But Charles's expression was troubled. "Catherine, please sit down," he said formally. "We need to discuss last evening's events." Kate sat across from her father-in-law, maintaining her composure despite knowing she was about to be criticized for her success. "I trust you're satisfied with how the evening went." Charles began carefully. "Very satisfied, sir. The charity exceeded their fundraising goals, and several new partnerships were established. I believe we successfully raised awareness for children's literacy in a way that will have lasting impact." "Yes, the charitable outcomes were excellent," Charles acknowledged. "However, I've received some concerns about the dynamics between family members during the event." Kate waited, knowing that this was where the real conversation would begin. Camilla felt that her offers of assistance were perhaps not received in the spirit they were intended. Charles continued diplomatically. "I greatly appreciate Her Majesty's interest in supporting my work," Kate replied carefully. "However, I felt it was important to maintain the focus on the charity's specific mission and the program we had carefully developed together." Charles studied her for a long moment. "Catherine, you must understand that within our family, experience and seniority carry significant weight. When Camilla offers guidance or assistance, it's based on years of successfully navigating these types of public events." "I understand that, sir. But I also believe that each patronage relationship requires individual attention and understanding. What works for one charity or cause might not be appropriate for another." It was a diplomatic way of saying that she wouldn't automatically defer to Camilla's wishes, that she intended to maintain some independence in how she carried out her royal duties. "There's also the matter of public perception," Charles said, his tone becoming more serious. "The press has been particularly attentive to interactions between family members. We can't afford to give the impression of division or competition within the royal family." Kate felt a flash of frustration. "Sir, I believe the press coverage has been entirely positive. The focus has remained on charitable work and royal service. I've been very careful to avoid any appearance of inappropriate behavior." "The coverage itself isn't the issue," Charles replied. "It's the broader pattern of attention and how it might be interpreted. Your popularity is an asset to the crown, but it must be managed carefully to ensure it supports rather than overshadows the existing structure." There was the same message Kate had been receiving for months. Her success was simultaneously valued and feared, appreciated and resented. "What exactly are you asking of me?" Kate said quietly. Charles leaned back in his chair, looking older than his years. "I'm asking you to remember that you're part of a team, not a solo performer. Your individual success must always be balanced with collective family welfare and established hierarchies, even when that means being less effective in my role. Especially then. The monarchy has survived for centuries because individuals have been willing to subordinate their personal ambitions to the greater good of the institution." Kate felt something shift inside her, a recognition that she was being asked to make a choice that would define her entire future as a royal. She could accept this limitation, become a more subdued and controlled version of herself, and maintain family harmony. Or she could continue to be authentic and effective, knowing it might create ongoing conflict. "I understand the family's concerns," she said finally, "but I also have a responsibility to the charities and causes I represent. I believe I can serve the crown best by being genuine and effective in my work, while always maintaining appropriate respect for family hierarchy." It was as close to a refusal as she could manage while still being diplomatic. But both she and Charles understood that she was declining to diminish herself for the comfort of others. Charles nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Very well, but please understand that your choices will have consequences, not just for you, but for William and your children. The monarchy is larger than any individual member, and it requires sacrifices from all of us." After the meeting, Kate felt emotionally drained but also strangely liberated. She had been given a clear choice and had made her decision. She would continue to be authentic and effective in her role, regardless of the political complications it might create. That afternoon, she found herself alone in her private sitting room when William returned from his own royal engagements. His expression told her that he had already heard about her meeting with his father. "Kate, we need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with concern. She looked at her husband, the man she loved, the future king, the person caught between loyalty to her and loyalty to his family. For the first time, she wondered if their marriage would survive the pressures being placed on it by the institution they both served. "I know what you're going to say," she said quietly. "But, William, I can't become someone I'm not just to make other people comfortable. If that makes me unsuitable to be queen, then perhaps we need to reconsider what we're doing here." The words hung between them like a challenge. For the first time since their wedding, Kate had openly questioned whether she belonged in this life, whether the sacrifices being demanded were too great. William sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "Kate, you're suitable to be queen. You're perfect for it. But the family is struggling with how to integrate your strengths without disrupting established relationships and power structures. And if those structures are preventing me from doing my job effectively..." William was quiet for a long moment, and Kate could see him wrestling with the same questions that had been tormenting her. Finally, he spoke. "Then, maybe it's time for those structures to evolve." It was the first time he had suggested that the system might need to change rather than expecting Kate to adapt to it. But even as relief flooded through her, Kate knew that they were entering uncharted territory, challenging traditions that had been established over centuries. The crown sat on its stand across the room, beautiful and impassive. But Kate no longer saw it as something that would inevitably change her. Instead, she began to wonder if she might be the one to change what wearing it meant. The weeks following Kate's conversation with William had been filled with careful maneuvering and subtle tensions. While nothing explicit had been said, the royal household seemed to be operating in two camps: those who supported Kate's more authentic approach to her role, and those who believed she needed to be more carefully managed and controlled. Princess and had quietly expressed her support for Kate's independence, while other family members maintained a careful neutrality. The palace staff, always sensitive to shifting power dynamics, watched every interaction for signs of which direction the winds were blowing. Kate had continued her royal duties with renewed determination, but she could feel the pressure building towards some kind of confrontation. It came, unexpectedly, on what should have been a routine afternoon at the palace. She was in her private study, reviewing materials for an upcoming visit to a women's shelter, when her lady-in-waiting announced that Camilla wished to see her urgently. Kate found the queen consort in the blue drawing room, standing before the large windows that overlooked the palace gardens. "Catherine, thank you for coming so quickly," Camilla said, turning from the window. Her expression was more serious than Kate had ever seen it. "Of course. How can I help you?" Camilla gestured to a chair, and Kate sat, noting that the older woman remained standing, a subtle assertion of authority. "I've been thinking a great deal about our conversation regarding your role within the family," Camilla began. "And I've come to realize that perhaps I haven't been clear enough about certain expectations and boundaries." Kate felt her stomach tighten, but she maintained her composure. "I thought we had reached an understanding about how to balance individual effectiveness with family unity. Did we?" Camilla's voice carried a new edge. "Because your recent behavior suggests that you believe you can operate independently of family guidance and protocol." The polite facade was finally dropping, and Kate found herself facing the woman who had fought ruthlessly for her position and wasn't about to let it be threatened by anyone, even the future queen. "I believe I can operate effectively while maintaining appropriate respect for family hierarchy," Kate replied carefully. "Respect?" Camilla's eyebrows rose. "Is it respectful to publicly dismiss the guidance of senior family members? Is it respectful to prioritize your own agenda over family unity?" Kate felt a surge of anger, but forced herself to remain calm. "I've never dismissed anyone's guidance. I've simply maintained that I have a responsibility to be effective in my role, even when that means making independent decisions about how best to serve my patronages." Camilla moved closer, and Kate could see the steel beneath her polished exterior. "Your role, Catherine, is whatever this family decides it should be. You seem to have forgotten that you married into this institution, not the other way around." The words hit like a slap. Kate stood up, no longer willing to remain seated while being lectured like a child. "I haven't forgotten anything," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I married William because I love him. I accepted this life because I wanted to serve. But I won't diminish myself or compromise my effectiveness just to make others feel more secure in their positions." Camilla's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "You think this is about insecurity? This is about order, tradition, and the survival of an institution that has endured for 1,000 years. It's about understanding that individual desires must always be subordinated to the greater good. And if the greater good includes having effective, authentic representatives of the crown, authenticity is a luxury we can't afford when it threatens stability." They faced each other across the elegant room. Two women who had both married into the royal family, but had drawn very different conclusions about what that meant. Camilla had survived by becoming nearly unassailable, perfectly controlled, willing to wait decades for acceptance. Kate was refusing to make the same compromises. "I won't become someone I'm not," Kate said quietly, but firmly. "If that's what being royal requires, then perhaps I'm not suited for this life." It was the first time she had openly expressed doubt about her future in the royal family, and the words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Camilla's expression changed, becoming calculatingly sympathetic. "Catherine, I understand that this is difficult. The pressures of royal life can be overwhelming, especially for someone who didn't grow up in this world. But questioning your suitability for this role, well, that raises concerns about your commitment to William and to your children's futures." The implication was clear and cruel. If Kate couldn't adapt to royal expectations, she would be seen as abandoning not just her duties, but her family. "Don't," Kate said, her voice carrying a warning. "Don't use my children or my marriage to try to control me. I'm simply pointing out the reality of your situation. You have responsibilities that extend beyond your personal comfort or preferences." Kate felt something snap inside her. Months of pressure, manipulation, and subtle threats finally pushing her beyond her breaking point. "My personal comfort," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Is that what you think this is about? I've given up my privacy, my independence, my ability to be spontaneous or genuine in public. I've accepted constant scrutiny, criticism, and judgment. I've let palace staff manage every aspect of my life, from what I wear to what I say. And you think I'm concerned about my personal comfort?" Camilla seemed taken aback by Kate's sudden intensity, but she maintained her composure. "I think you're struggling to understand what service truly means in this context. I understand service perfectly. What I don't understand is why serving effectively is seen as a threat to anyone else's position." "Because," Camilla said, her voice becoming dangerously quiet, "effectiveness without proper deference can undermine the entire structure we're all supposed to support." Kate stared at her, finally understanding the full extent of what was being asked of her. It wasn't enough to be effective. She had to be effective in a way that didn't overshadow anyone else, didn't challenge anyone else's importance, didn't suggest that the royal family might benefit from change or evolution. "So I should be just effective enough to fulfill my duties, but not so effective that I become independently influential. You should be effective in a way that strengthens the existing order rather than challenging it." Kate moved toward the window, looking out at the gardens where tourists gathered daily, hoping for a glimpse of royal life. Those people deserved representatives who were genuinely committed to serving them, not royal family members more concerned with protecting their own positions than with doing their jobs well. "What if the existing order isn't serving the people as well as it could?" she asked, not turning around. "The existing order has served for centuries, and perhaps it's time for it to evolve." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Kate had crossed a line, openly suggesting that the royal family's traditional way of operating might need to change. When she turned back to face Camilla, the older woman's expression had hardened into something implacable. Evolution is one thing, Catherine. Revolution is quite another. And what you're suggesting, prioritizing individual effectiveness over collective harmony, putting personal authenticity above institutional stability, that's not evolution. That's destruction. Kate realized that they had moved far beyond the specific issues of her public role or her relationship with Camilla. They were now debating the fundamental nature of what the monarchy should be in the modern world. "I don't want to destroy anything," Kate said quietly. "I want to serve in a way that actually helps people, that makes a real difference in their lives. If that requires some changes in how we operate as a family, then maybe those changes are overdue." Camilla moved to a small side table and picked up a jewelry box that Kate hadn't noticed before. She opened it to reveal Kate's tiara, the one she had worn to the ceremony that now seemed like a lifetime ago. "This crown has been worn by queens for generations," Camilla said, holding it up to catch the light. Each of them understood that wearing it meant accepting certain limitations, certain sacrifices. Some of them wanted to change things too, to put their own stamp on the role. But the crown endures because it's larger than any individual who wears it. Kate stared at the tiara, understanding the symbolism. Camilla was reminding her that she was replaceable, that the crown would continue with or without her. "Are you threatening me?" Kate asked quietly. "I'm reminding you of reality. You can choose to work within the system and find your place in it, or you can continue to fight against it and face the consequences." "And what consequences would those be?" Camilla set the crown down carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Isolation, increasing criticism in the press, questions about your suitability for your role, pressure on William to choose between his loyalty to you and his loyalty to the institution he was born to lead." It was a comprehensive threat, designed to make Kate understand exactly what she would face if she continued to assert her independence. Kate looked at the crown sitting in its box, beautiful and cold. For months, she had seen it as a symbol of service and honor. Now she understood that it was also a symbol of control, of the price demanded from anyone who wore it. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course, take all the time you need. But remember, Catherine, some decisions, once made, are very difficult to undo." As Kate left the room, she felt as though she was walking away from more than just a conversation. She was walking away from any illusion that she could remain true to herself while fully embracing royal life as it currently existed. That evening, she sat alone in her private sitting room, staring at the empty stand where her crown usually resided. Camilla had kept it, a reminder of the choice Kate now faced. She could surrender her authentic self and accept the role as it was defined by others. She could become the controlled, careful, deferential royal that the existing system required. She would be accepted, protected, and allowed to continue her charitable work within carefully prescribed limits. Or she could continue to insist on being effective, authentic, and independent. She could fight for her right to serve in her own way and accept whatever consequences that choice might bring. The door opened quietly, and William entered. He looked tired, older than his years, weighted down by responsibilities that seemed to grow heavier each day. "I heard about your conversation with Camilla," he said, sitting beside her on the sofa. Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak without her emotions overwhelming her. "Kate," William said gently, taking her hands in his, "I need you to know that whatever you decide, whatever choice you make about your future here, I will support you. Even if it means challenging everything I was raised to believe about how this family should operate." It was the declaration of love and loyalty she had needed to hear, but it also brought home the impossible position they were all in. William was offering to choose her over his family, his training, his entire understanding of his role as future king. "I can't ask you to do that," she said quietly. "You're not asking. I am choosing. Because somewhere along the way, watching you navigate this impossible situation, I've realized that maybe the family needs to change more than you do." Kate looked at her husband and saw in his eyes the same struggle she had been facing, the tension between duty and authenticity, between tradition and evolution, between serving the institution and serving the people it was supposed to represent. Outside, the ancient walls of the palace stood as they had for centuries, witnesses to countless royal dramas and difficult choices. Inside, Kate faced the most important decision of her life, knowing that whatever she chose would determine not just her own future, but possibly the future of the monarchy itself. The crown sat in Camilla's room, waiting to see who would claim it and what kind of queen would eventually wear it. But for the first time, Kate wondered if the real question wasn't whether she was suitable for the crown, but whether the crown as it currently existed was suitable for the world it was meant to serve.